Coming up, HBO boxing digital correspondent Kieran Mulvaney. Stay tuned.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Welcome, everybody, to Spotlight On with my... I'm going to call you a co-host today.
Okay,
because you're strong in that area. Writer and speaker of words, author of books, retired saver of whales, which we can dive into a bit. Sure. And I love this, insufficiently frequent visitor of polar regions. But most importantly today, HBO boxing digital correspondent Kieran Mulvaney. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for inviting me to be here.
Nice, I like that. They always surprise me with the bell. We got here through the traffic. We made it to the studio. Thanks for sitting down with us.
Oh, you bet.
Of course, this Saturday, you've got Vargas and Salido at StubHub Center. We'll touch a little bit on that. But first, just wanted to dive in. Mm-hmm. Before we broadcast, we talked about a little bit about your life before boxing.
Right.
And I noticed on your bio page on your website, which anyone can, it's kieranmulvaney.net or .com.
Yeah.
In the 80s, you began kind of as a, would you say, a conservationist?
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to write about wildlife. I wanted to save wildlife. I decided that's what I was going to do. I left high school to do it. I mean, I dropped out of high school in like 10th grade.
Oh, you dropped out?
Yeah, I completely dropped out.
Okay, so what was the motivation to...
I hated school.
Well, you're a smart guy, though.
Yeah, but that's why I hated school.
Yeah.
And I was at boarding school, so I was brought up in the United Kingdom, and I was so I was away from home a lot. And I decided that I knew what I wanted to do, and I just wanted to do it. And I said to my father, look, this is what I really want to do. And the last thing he really wanted was he was looking to have his kids be able to support him in his old age. And he knew that if one of them was a writer, that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
He goes, well, why don't you stay at school, learn to become a doctor or a lawyer, and then if you want to be a writer. And I'm like, I'm staying in school till I'm 24. Like, I could be dead by then. So, and to their great credit, they allowed me to do it. My parents, they didn't step in my way. And I decided very much that was what I was going to do. And I assumed that my entire life would be based around doing that.
Well, I mean, I would say it still is, and
Right.
it was a large chunk then. So you dropped out. So what was the moment, you're in 10th grade and you're like, I don't want to do school anymore. Yeah. So what was there had to have been some kind of moment where you're like, okay, this is why.
Well, it started very early on. My dad was in the Navy, and he would always show me photographs of all his travels, all the places that he'd been, and he would put into Africa a lot. And when he had downtime, he'd go on safari and, in Kenya, and I'd always see that. And my parents, my dad especially, was a great reader. He instilled in me the love of words from a very early age. And we had bookshelves, and they were stuffed full of like Reader's Digest and National Geographic books, Our Wonderful World, Amazing Wildlife. And I would sit up late and read that. And I became really fascinated in the idea that, wow, I want to do what Dad does, which is travel around the world, but without the killing people thing. and it would be nice to do that and be able to see all this wildlife and write about it and report about it. And when you're young, you don't think about the practical difficulties involved in doing something like that. So I just resolved that's what I shall do. And I progressively hated being at school, particularly being at boarding school. And instead of doing my homework at night, I would be reading these books and mentally transported to somewhere else in the world where I really wanted to be.
Self-educated.
Yeah.
Like you're already majoring in something before you knew you had to.
Yeah.
Did you go back and get... No.
No, I have no qualifications.
my resume. Well, now you have a vast resume.
Right.
So they were okay. They backed everything.
They were very good about it. They were very smart. They said, well, okay, if you're going to do this, then they allowed me to convert like the study in the house into a little office. And they said, but you're going to pay us a little bit of rent. And it was a really nominal amount of rent. But they instilled in me the notion that if you're going to do this, there aren't going to be any free rides in life. And I hooked up with a couple of organizations, environmental organizations that hired me to do things like write their newsletters and things like that. And then through a couple of them, I met a guy who was doing a project on whaling, and we ended up starting this organization. I think I was 19 years old at the time, called the Whale and Dolphin Conservation Society. That I think it is now one of the biggest organizations in the world, might be the biggest, devoted entirely to whales and dolphins. And then when I was around 21, Greenpeace headhunted me. And first of all, I was doing writing for them on whales and dolphins. And then, as inevitably happens it's a logical thing. They said, you've been doing a lot of really good writing for us on whales. And I go, uh-huh. So we want you to lead an expedition to Antarctica and go and look for whaling ships. So I'm like, all right.
Okay, cool.
It took a lot of Jägermeisters, but I said yes. And then for a number of years, that was mainly what I did. I would go to the Antarctic with a ship, and we would plan these expeditions, and we'd look for whaling ships and try to stop them from hunting whales. And I did that for a number of years until it's kind of a young person's game to be doing all of that.
Sure.
And I got a little bit old. That got a little bit old, and I left and ended up writing then about wildlife and the environment. But being in the Antarctic really instilled in me the love of the polar regions. That's where that came from. And then I ended up being in a cabin in Alaska, as you do, and I'd written in my 30s, written a bunch of books about the environment, and I thought, you know what, I want to try to do something completely different, and
led you to the boxing world. I love how your story of dropping out is a little different. Like, you hear either stand-up comedians become brilliant, or you just hear about it's funny, you dropped out of high school to educate yourself more on something.
Right.
And then you just became, you said that before we dive into boxing and everything. Sure. So, and this is a large chunk of how you became a great boxing writer, but so you said your dad was a well-read person.
Yes.
So do you think that had the influence of how you became a writer, your writing skills? Because did you have an interest in English and how to write?
No, I was always precociously good at reading when I was like a very small child. So I'm told, I don't remember this, that I was terrible at sleeping. Like, they would put me, now I'm great at sleeping. God, it's my favorite thing in the world. But they, would put me to bed, and just as Dad was going up the stairs to go to bed, I'd be coming down going, I've had enough sleep now. And so Dad would put me to bed with the book, but he wouldn't read it, he would have me read it. And I became really good as a consequence of reading at a very young age. And so much so that when I was in elementary school, they'd even send me up a couple of grades just to read to the older kids, and you can imagine how popular that made me.
Oh yeah.
So
not bullied at all.
No, not even a little bit.
Coolest guy in school.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's also where I developed a sense of humor, because that's a very good way of deflecting that kind of problem.
Much like stand-ups.
So
Exactly.
So I think that, and he was a very literary guy. I would ask him, what does this word mean? And he would just say, look it up.
That's the way to do it.
Right?
There should just, I know there are some classes like that, but early on, way earlier on, there should be classes like that. So
that you know that you have ways to find things out for yourself, and you were encouraged to do it.
Yeah.
And just having that skill, and even just that approach to life, I think is really very important. But he absolutely instilled in me a love of words. Like, he loved the language. He loved words. And then he also had this travel component to his life. So I had not only the love of words, but something to put words to and write about. So no, that was hugely influential.
Well, now you're still traveling in a different way. You're not on ships.
Right.
I don't think. Maybe
rarely.
Maybe Monaco, you can be sailing around. So we have this path.
Right.
You are so busy at a young age. Mm-hmm. You're doing you find this. What was the name of the organization? Whale and Dolphin
Conservation Society. Yeah.
So you find that in your teens.
Right.
And you do this throughout the 90s.
Right.
Into the early 2000s, and you're living in Alaska.
Yeah.
And I read on your biography that you wanted to do something completely different. Right. So what led you to the boxing world, and what led you to Vegas, like you were saying?
So there were a couple of different elements. So I'd for a long time been very interested in boxing. I've been a fan of boxing. And that was a subject that interested me, as well as being a fan of it. And I also, when I grew up as a kid, there was this show, I don't know how many people will remember it, a detective show starring Robert Urich as Dan Tanner, who would drive around Las Vegas in a Ford Thunderbird convertible. And he had this super cool apartment that he would just drive the convertible straight into his apartment, right? And Tony Curtis was this casino manager, and he worked for him. And it was just called Vegas. And it would show like really late at night, and I watched that, and I think, wow, the coolest thing in the whole world must be to drive a convertible through Las Vegas.
This is great, by the way, because you dropped out of school, became a writer, and now you're halfway into your career, and you're like, what can I do? Oh yeah, remember what I liked as a kid?
What can I do different?
I want to do this.
Yeah, what can I do different? And I lived in this cabin in Alaska, and the guy in the cabin next to me co-owned a bar just on the Arizona side of the Arizona-Nevada border. So he would right across the river from Laughlin, Nevada. And so he would regularly go through Vegas. And I'm like, God, I always wanted to go to Vegas. And so I suddenly had a little bit of money, disposable income. And the reason I had a little bit of money was because some friends and I did a website that was very silly and was only for our entertainment, and became massively viral and earned us a lot of money. I don't know if you remember during the Iraq War. This is like, it's always terrible to say. This was this funny thing that came out of the Iraq War.
Well, you know, something had to.
But there was this information minister in Saddam Hussein's regime who, as the US was invading Iraq, would be going, everything's fine, there are no Americans here, and there'd be practically tanks in the background, you know, and he would come up with all kinds of ridiculous scenarios. We are going to declare victory any minute, and he became this kind of weird kind of cult hero. And some friends and I had this idea of just putting together a very stupid, very basic website that would imagine him, like, giving his spin on different battles throughout history. We did these very poor photoshops, and we just did these jokes about it, and we just listed some of his comments. His comments were hilarious. And we just put a dead link saying, get your Iraqi information minister t-shirts here. And we thought, har, har, har. And we showed it to a bunch of friends. And 2 days later, we were getting emails from like the United Kingdom going, there was a rugby team in England said, oh, we all want to wear the t-shirts, but the link is down.
Get out of here.
Huh. And then more people. So then through this outfit called Cafe Press, we started to design these t-shirts, and then we could put designs on frisbees and mouse pads and thong panties, and it was just like this caricature of him with these quotes. And then Reuters did a piece about our website, and after Reuters did a piece about the website, we were getting like 8 million hits a day.
Wow.
In 2003, and we became this huge thing. For a month, we became huge, and we sold so much of this merchandise. And we tried very hard to give it away, some of the money. You know, we went to the Red Cross and said, "Please take some of this money. We feel very guilty." And they said, "We don't want your money. We don't want to be associated with your website." So anyway, that gave me a bit of cash, and I thought, you know what? I'm finally going to go to Las Vegas. I'm going to take some time out. I'd just written a book about my Antarctic adventures mostly.
Did you get a Thunderbird, or is that what it was?
Well, no, it was a Mustang.
A Mustang? Did you get a Mustang?
Yeah, got a Mustang.
Oh,
and
perfect.
Actually, it's actually not that cool.
That is cool.
It's
better than
all right.
reading in front of the
it's
class.
All right.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, much better than reading, or much better than the playground after you've read in front of the class. And I decided I wanted to spend like 6 to 8 months writing a book about the characters involved in Las Vegas boxing. So I was going to do profiles of, I picked a few fighters at different stages of their careers, but it was also going to be about the ring doctor. It was also going to be about the cut man. It was going to be about a referee, you know, and pick all these guys, people to do profiles on. I would go and I would do this very interesting thing. It would make me get my, you know, boxing thrill out the way, and it would last 8 months, and that would be great. So I went down, spent a bit of time in Las Vegas, because I had absolutely no background, no association at all. Why is this whale saving guy writing about boxing? I had to basically write a proposal that was half the book, essentially. So that's why I spent so much time down there. I've got credentialed to a couple of fights. I was very happy with it. My agent was very happy with it. And we sent it to a bunch of publishers who almost universally said, this is really interesting, but boxing fans don't buy books.
Of course.
Right? They have their websites and their magazines, and they're stupid. So we couldn't sell the book. And I'm like,
What was the name of that book?
I don't think I even got to the stage of giving it a name.
Oh, okay.
You know? And so, and then came the other problem when it turned out that I'd forgotten to pay taxes on all the website money.
Whoops.
So now we were in a bit of trouble, and I thought, well, what am I going to do now? And to my great good fortune was when around that time I'd fallen in love with just being around the sport, and I kind of didn't want it to end after 8 months. And very shortly after that, I had an opportunity to start doing some work with ESPN. So bit by bit, I was at least able to start clawing back some of the money that I'd lost by spending all this time in Las Vegas writing a book that didn't sell.
You mentioned about picking a few fighters, and I mean, okay, but take me back to, because you had an interest.
Yes.
So as a kid, where did this interest in boxing come from?
I don't know what started it, except that it was, you know, at the time, so I was born in 68, so I was growing up in the 70s, which was obviously a great time to be growing up and interested in boxing. There were household names, even, you know, that went across the Atlantic then. Ali, obviously, but then you're talking about the Sugar Ray Leonards and the Marvin Haglers and those guys. But also boxing was a pretty popular sport in the UK, much more than it is here now, and it's even more popular in the UK now. And so I just remember being aware of it. We had a fighter who's now a commentator in the UK called Jim Watt, who was a lightweight titleist. And I remember hearing that he would, you know, he defended his title 4 times, which was a British record at the time. And I remember as a kid brushing my teeth at night and listening to the radio and hearing that he'd lost his title to Alexis Arguello. I was like, wow, Jim Watt finally lost. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And so I remember that. And then I remember just listening really late at night, because a lot of the fights in Vegas were really late in the UK, obviously, to some of the fights involving like British fighters, guys like John Conte, who was a light heavyweight, and then a bit later on, Frank Bruno, Lloyd Hunnigan, those kind of guys. So I would listen to that late at night on the radio and gradually kind of develop. Alan Minter was another guy who lost his title to Marvin Hagler.
While reading Reader's Digest.
Yeah, pretty much. Exactly.
Boxing on the radio, Reader's Digest.
Our fascinating wildlife.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that certainly had developed. And then by the time I was thinking about doing this, I'd gotten to a point where I would be reading Ring magazine whenever I could, and all the other magazines. And this is when then websites had started. ESPN, I don't think really had much of a website then, but sites like Max Boxing and House of Boxing and Fight News were really starting to make it easy to just spend all day reading about boxing if you wanted to. So I felt like, and I would buy every pay-per-view that I could afford. I'd watch every HBO and Showtime broadcast. So I felt like I was reasonably educated, at least in the sense of what fighters had fought who and all that kind of stuff, but not about the inner workings of the sport at all.
But you had a historical view.
Yeah.
You knew the sport from the 70s and 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're educated. So ESPN, you says, like, they approach you. How does that happen? Because now you're in debt. Now you have this tax thing.
Well, fortunately, there was a publicist who at the time was working with Goosen, called Rachel Charles, who's also from the UK, who lives here actually in LA. And she had been doing some pitching to ESPN. And they had said to her, oh, by the way, if you know any people out there who can do some features stuff for us for boxing, you know. She immediately called me. And the editor at the time was amazed when within 5 minutes of him just mentioning this casually to Rachel, he got a call from me or an email from me going, dude, I'm your man. And so we started doing some feature stuff for them. And over the years, over the course of 8 or 9 years, ended up writing quite a lot for them, actually. And they gave me great opportunities to do some really good, in-depth, lengthy, fun stuff for them.
And then the podcast. I mean, that world was so, because if I have my numbers correctly, you were hired as, of course, the writer first, and then and they developed a podcast for you in 08, if I remember.
I think that's right, yeah.
And that's pretty early if you're thinking podcast days.
Yeah.
I know it kind of just lived. I remember the ESPN boxing site had your podcast down there. It'd be like 20 minutes.
Yeah, at first, yeah.
So was that, I mean, that's pretty innovative for that time.
Yeah.
So did you have a part of that?
We had a great young editor at the boxing page then, a guy called Darius Ortiz. And we were talking, I remember we were at some New York fight, and I don't remember what it was, but I remember him saying to me, it's like, do you like to do other stuff apart from writing? And I said, yeah, I really want to get much more into broadcasting. He said, would you be interested in doing a podcast? And I go, oh man, I'd love to. I'd absolutely love to. And initially, I think our very first ones were really short, like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, here's my take on something or other. And then it just grew and grew and grew until I just became like this, you know, like Andy Rooney guy just sitting in front of the microphone.
It's just you.
Just me. It was one take because I didn't know how to edit. So, like, if I screwed up, like 18 minutes into a 20-minute podcast, I'd be like,
the hell with it.
Hello, and start all over again.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was about 20 minutes or so, like you said, of just me.
Just babbling.
Babbling with occasional dramatic,
but people want to hear that.
Pauses. I was quite surprised, but yeah, apparently so.
I mean, there's a market for anything that you're interested in.
Yeah.
And people don't want to hear a scripted thing. They just, I mean, you can write down your notes, but you were just talking. And it was cool that it was one person. I don't know if that was it because you were the guy?
I was the only available talent, I think. And I
no Dan Raphael or anything like that?
Yeah, well, Dan had his own gig.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to, again, I had no idea. I was like left to my own devices. I had no idea how to patch a guest in, even if I wanted to have a guest. So I'm just like, okay, I'll just keep talking.
Yeah, they were happy with the product. I mean, you did it for a number of years.
Yeah.
So let's jump ahead.
Okay.
So I know we're going quickly through this career thing, but because now you're so prevalent on HBO now.
Right.
So you put in a decade at ESPN, around close
More or less,
to.
I think, yeah.
But then you were doing some things for HBO during that time.
Right, because I was just freelancing for ESPN. It was, just on an ad hoc basis, so I was free to do other stuff.
So when did your relationship with HBO begin? Do you remember like what project or how they approached you?
Well, first of all, I would do a couple of things when they did some of their like countdown shows to, they'd ask me on as sometimes they would have external media guys, talk about a fight or so on, and they would do that. But the main thing started because very early on, I got to know this guy called Bert Sugar, who some of the listeners and viewers will know was the great character of boxing history and boxing writing of our times. And he was one of the first guys that I approached. And he and I instantly hit it off. And one of the things, because I showed him a copy of a book that I'd already done, on a completely different subject, and he comes up to me and goes, "Young man, you're a good writer. You're a good writer." And we would talk.
That was a good Bert.
You
do a few good ones.
And he goes, at some point, he goes to me, "Kieran, you know what I really like about you?" He goes, "You drink." He goes, "These young guys, they don't know what journalism's about. Being in the bar and getting to know people and getting to talk to people, and they don't know that they're stuck behind their computers. You drink." And I liked drinking with Bert because he put it on the HBO bill, so that was always good. And we got on very well. And there was this guy called Chris Vivian who was at the very early stages of getting HBO to understand the importance of the digital world. We're all focused on linear, it's all on the broadcast, and they're like, "No, that's great, but you also need to start looking at this." And he overheard us. Just basically, we would go back and forth and just, like Waldorf and Statler, from the Muppet Show, just like going back and forth. And he goes, "You know what? We got to do something with this." And he put together, I think, the first digital-only HBO boxing videos, which was a little show that he made, like about a 5 to 10 minute show for Bert with me as his foil.
Yeah.
Sweet Science with Bert Sugar. And we would preview, the very first one that we did was previewing Floyd Mayweather against Juan Manuel Marquez. And
Bert, I remember these shows. Bert had a drink in his hand and a stogie.
Yes.
I love it. During the broadcast. That's like old television right there.
Yeah. We did one, I think it was before Mayweather Mosley? It might have been before Mayweather Mosley, where we were shooting outside by the pool, Bloody Marys.
So good.
9 a.m., Las Vegas.
That's what people want to watch.
Found a photograph of that the other day, and because it turned out that it had been like 6 years previously or something that we'd done it, and just then we're like, yeah, it was a good day.
That's great.
It was a good day. And so it kind of started with that. And then as the website expanded, I would be doing some blogging for them and doing some articles for them. And then a little over 2 years ago, the digital component took another big leap when they decided they wanted to do digital videos for every fight, real digital assets that they could share with other boxing media and so forth. And they asked me to do that. And just at the time that they asked me to do that, ESPN ended my podcast. So the timing was perfect.
And the tax money was paid off from the website.
Yeah, by then.
Exactly.
By then. It had taken a while, but yeah, by then. Yeah, exactly.
So that was kind of a gradual. With HBO, it was kind of a gradual. You did some work with them, and then Bert, and then once you were done with ESPN, kind of came on full time digitally. The podcast. Yeah. So now you do the HBO boxing podcast with Eric Raskin.
Yes.
It's a great show.
Yeah,
I listened to it.
It's much more fun doing that with Eric than it was ever doing anything just staring at a microphone and just
Did you? I know you said Eric is. What was your involvement with developing this podcast?
It was all Eric's idea.
Really?
Eric had been pushing it for a long time. And Michael Gluckstadt, our editor at HBO.com, was at the stage where he was also starting to be able to push for additional content. And the timing was perfect in the end because it came just as we started to do this new digital video, just as there was this extra expansion. So now not only do we have a well-established website, but it wasn't just articles. Now it was other media. And I think we benefited that there wasn't enough awareness yet of what is a podcast. It kind of, sure, podcast, that sounds fine. Yeah. All these videos are going well, so sure, what the heck. And we just kind of went with it. And now I think it's become a pretty established part of what the between fight content and even the fight week content that HBO produces. I think we've done 121 episodes now.
Yeah, it's like 2.5 years worth.
Yeah,
And it's great. It's always up there on the sports. You know, if you look at iTunes,
Yeah.
it's always up there. It's high ranking. It's a popular podcast. It's good. And you guys mix it up, like we were talking about earlier. About you guys had the fantasy boxing draft. Then you have all the previews and reviews of all the fights, and of course you have Vargas and Salido preview that was just put up yesterday.
Yeah.
So everyone check that out. It's a great show. There's a couple things, and we had plenty of time to talk earlier in traffic. But a lot of times people don't really get to know who's talking behind the mic, and you know what they think of certain things in the sport. Like, you know, you're pretty much a reporter,
right?
And occasionally you blog about certain subjects, but a lot of times, you know, and you're not blogging about boxing. You're writing a review of a fight, and no one gets to know who's your favorite fighter, or how did you get to love the sport. So I just had a lot of grab bag questions here. So if you've written a lot of books, so if you could write a book about not boxing and nothing to do with whales or dolphins or the environment, if you could tackle one other subject, what would it be?
I'll tell you what, I started to do once and then had to abandon because I just couldn't handle it.
Okay.
Because I thought an actual progression, I thought when I started to do the boxing thing, I thought, you know what I'm going to start doing? I'm going to start doing subcultures. And I thought, the only thing kind of ickier and dirtier than boxing has to be pornography. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to do, with the same approach that I was going to do with the boxing book. Like, I didn't want to just do about porn stars. I want to, like, what's the deal with the guy who holds the boom mic during all, like, what's going through his head? Yeah. Is he like, God, I got to remember to get some milk?
I'm sure he's reminded that sometimes during the shooting. I'm not sure when, but you can make your best guess.
Yeah, so I did think about it, and then I just couldn't handle it.
So you actually dove into that world for a minute?
Yeah.
Anything you can talk about?
I don't know that I would say I dove in it. I put a toe in. And then
was that the name of the first movie that you're on set for?
I never quite figured out what my porn name would have been.
Oh man, you know, that's good. There's got to be. We'll come up with something. They always say it's your first pet and the street you grew up on.
Ooh, that wouldn't be good.
What would that be?
No, Dina Hewenden. That's not remotely. That's no.
Dina Hewenden.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen.
That's like Yeah, I'm not sure. We'll come back to that.
Okay.
Yeah, if any of the fans out there have any ideas for Kieran's porn name, let us know.
Yeah.
Mine would have been
or don't.
Garfield Brock, which I think is a decent.
Better. Better.
Brock's a solid last name. Garfield.
Yeah.
Cartoonish.
Nice. Yeah.
We were talking about venues, and you're going to be at the StubHub Center this weekend, and it's become slowly somehow over the past 8 years, just this it just always has amazing fights. I remember with Vasquez and Marquez, like Jack Nicholson was going to fights then.
Really?
And now you see more and more celebrities coming out, boxers coming out. And it's such a nice small venue that's outdoors. What are some of your, a handful of venues you really love going to?
I kind of like the more intimate ones like that. I mean, I do love StubHub, not just because of the great fights, but being outside on a Southern California evening can be, pretty nice.
Yeah.
And it's much better. We did a couple of I did one Yankee Stadium fight.
Oh, it was Cotto.
Yeah, it was Cotto. And that wasn't fun because it was humid. And it was sticky, and it was just an unpleasant experience. But a nice LA evening, that'll work. So I do like StubHub. I like the theater at Madison Square Garden because it also has that same kind of intimacy and again, like the other huge factor is, of course, when you have good crowds. And there's a pretty loyal boxing community in New York in the same way that there is here. It's a different kind of crowd.
Yeah.
Especially if you have like a Polish fighter on a card at the theater of Madison Square Garden, the place goes nuts. I kind of enjoyed, I've forgotten the name of it, but the venue in Monaco where Gennady Golovkin fought Martin Murray, and the most...
How could you hate it?
Yeah,
because
the reason
where
I
you
like
were.
it is because it was in Monaco.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it could have just been like outside in some field, and I'd have been very...
on the beach. Bash at the beach.
Right, very happy. And, I like the Mandalay Bay Arena. After so many fights there, I'm kind of fond of the MGM because after a while, you're not just being there to enjoy it, you're there, which is going to give me the most easy opportunities to do the work that I have to do. And MGM and Mandalay, they're so used to it. Everything's easy. Everything you need is there. Nothing's a problem. You get to know all the ushers after a while, all the security after a while. Everything is fine. You kind of like that because you're there to work. It's a night's work. And so you just want to be able to get your work done properly, So I do like those places.
Is there something to be said about, I know with professional wrestlers, they say whenever they're in an outdoor a lot of times the noise escapes, like not a smaller venue like StubHub, but or even a bigger venue that like Cowboy Stadium where you could put 100,000 people, that it just doesn't, on TV it might not seem as rowdy.
It was interesting. So I did both the Cowboy Stadium fights that Manny Pacquiao did.
And Claudia.
Yeah, Claudia and Margarito.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. Just the enormity of the people there was a new experience. The sheer size of the people, of the crowd, was a new experience. But yeah, did it have that same kind of feel? I mean, because a lot of the people are only able to watch the fight on the big screen, right?
Yep.
And if you've got too big of a venue, you know, that said, it sounded like, you know, when Carl Froch knocked out George Groves at Wembley, and I think they had 100,000 people there. That did sound like that was a particularly amazing experience, because British sports fans generally
It's much more
are
ingrained.
a lot
Wembley
more
is more
rowdy.
ingrained in that than Dallas Stadium.
Yeah, and just British sports fans. They're just loud and they're
Rowdy.
Yeah. One of the very best atmospheres I ever had was when Floyd fought Ricky Hatton. And
The MGM.
The MGM. And the whole week, the Brits showed up. And at that stage, the dollar was really weak against the British pound. So they could all afford to come over for the whole week, whether they had tickets or not. And estimates varied, but at the end, people thought it was like 30,000, 40,000 Brits came over.
Wow.
And at one stage, allegedly, they say the MGM Grand ran out of beer.
I believe it.
It's possible.
Are we going to see another? I miss, because right now boxing, like you said, is pretty big in England, and but it's been a while, and Khan really didn't resonate and bring the fans over, because I mean, and plus it's tough to chant. There's only one Amir.
Right, you gotta have the right number of syllables.
Yeah, the syllables.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Are we going to see someone that's going to cross over? And because I just love those fans, much like the Mexican fans in LA, and like you said, the Polish fans in New York,
Right.
and I just miss that. Like occasionally, every few years, you'd get a big fighter to come to Vegas.
I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how big Anthony Joshua gets. I get the sense that he's probably got the highest ceiling of all those guys over there. Plus, he's a heavyweight. So, and you know, we potentially have some good opponents for him over here. So I'd be interested to see. And I don't know what kind of a fan base he's developed there yet. And whether he has that same kind of fan. But Ricky Hatton was particularly just exceptional. He was of his people, and there was just an enormous just affection for him that I think even, you know, the other guys, even the Hemeds or the Lewises or Amir or Carl Froch didn't have. But
Yeah, Ricky
those
was
kind
like
of
a
things
guy
happen.
from the bar.
Yeah, in fact, he was
He's
indeed.
he's probably there right now.
Exactly,
Yeah.
almost certainly. Yeah. So he actually just today tweeted or Facebooked a picture of he's in Spain on vacation, some breakfast he's having, which is like 4 fried eggs, 6
course.
slices of toast.
Yeah, no
you know,
more
all
weight
that kind of
management.
stuff. Ricky Fatton.
What's a terrible venue?
I don't know that I've been to any really terrible venues. There are some that I like less than others. The Thomas and Mack Center. Sorry, guys.
Well, now with the new arena in Vegas. So.
Yeah, so we probably won't be seeing it that much, but it's difficult because of access.
Yeah.
Apart from all of that, you know, so it's just harder to get to. It's harder to get away from. Is there any that I've been through that I've really just disliked? In the old days, Madison Square Garden was a bit of a pain, but they've completely redone everything there now, and it's a really quite enjoyable experience.
Yeah.
So, oh, you know what? Another one I should say, one of the really nice ones these days is the Forum. Since they reopened the Forum and redid
I
the
still haven't
Forum.
been back.
It is fantastic.
Yeah.
Again, it's like all the knowledgeable crowds that they used to have in the old days, they've just come right back.
Nice.
And Gennadi's fought there twice, Golovkin, who has, as we were talking about earlier, has created this incredible LA fan base. Chocolatito's fought there a couple of times, and he's got an existing fan base. Marquez was another guy. Marquez and Alvarado, another fight I saw. So, especially if you've got the right fighters in the right venues with the right fans, it's fantastic. And every fight I've been to at the Forum has been fantastic in terms of crowd atmosphere.
Yeah, I've heard that because nothing else happens there except for boxing and a concert.
Right.
And the acoustics I heard are great, and everything is renovated, and I heard it's very cool.
And the other single best experience still ringside that I think I've had was the CenturyLink Arena in Omaha, Nebraska. When Terrence Crawford fought Yuriorkis Gamboa, and this town that loves their guy Terrence Crawford and has no other professional sports to speak of. Great college sports and other sports, but no professional sports. And man, the roof came off that place.
That's fun.
That was incredible. There's nothing like a guy fighting in front of his hometown crowd. I think that's the
it's like it's in the city. It's like the only thing happening.
Yeah,
that's kind of cool.
Yeah, so that was a pretty amazing experience.
Hopefully he crosses over well in July
so.
and sells some pay-per-views. I'll be buying it for sure. And we talk about boxing as a whole, and you were talking about on your podcast about PEDs and how it's kind of a mess, and you guys go into detail with that. But is there something, you have all the sanctioning bodies and the belts and the PEDs. Is there something in boxing, if you were the commissioner, I'm handing it over to you, I'm handing the keys, you're like the Dana White of boxing.
Right.
What are you changing?
I think it is the sanctioning bodies. It's funny, like fighters like belts. Like people like us, they're like, what is the point of all the belts? Fighters like them. Yeah. They like them, and they can say, I'm the WBC champion. They get more money for a title fight. But the problem is you get people go, I don't know who the champion is anymore. And there was a time where there were, 8 weight classes and one world champion in each, and people knew who the middleweight champion was and the lightweight champion was and the heavyweight champion was. And now, I think it's the WBA tends to have 3 world champions of the same weight.
And a super.
And it's like, come on, Yeah. So I understand why fighters like them. But I think that's a really, really huge issue still in terms of people just understanding who the champion is. People need to be able to know who the fighters are and to be able to get invested and root for them.
I agree. Like that's, and I mean, there are a few other things you could tackle, but that's a good first. Yeah. I think a lot of fans would agree with you listening to you. Before it was, when you were watching as a kid, there were 8 weight classes. It was a little more, you couldn't just make a catch weight whenever you wanted to, like today, as you roll your eyes. And growing up, who did you really like, or who are a few fighters your favorites over time? I know that you have if people listen to the podcast, you love Miguel Cotto recently. Who'd you really like following?
As a kid, one of my favorite fighters was Aaron Pryor. Loved Aaron Pryor, which is an Ohio man. You'll like
Cincinnati, right?
Yeah. Just loved watching him fight. He was definitely one of my favorites. There were a lot of, because I was growing up in the UK, there were a lot of British fighters. Alan Minter, who was a middleweight champion, and so I was kind of upset when Marvin Hagler beat him. But then I became a huge Marvin Hagler fan. I mean, what a time to really start being interested in this when you're 15, 16, and guys are Marvin Hagler.
Oh, my God. Early 80s like that? They're all in their prime.
How can you not, So I think all of that group, all of the Duran, Leonard, Hagler, Hearns kind of guy, but I was especially a Hagler guy. I remember being real excited when Hearns fought Hagler, and it was on far too late even for me to stay up. And it was broadcast on UK network TV like Sunday morning, the tape delay, like 9, 10 a.m. And I didn't know what had happened, and I'm like sitting
no
there
internet,
on Sunday, exactly,
nothing. Now everything gets ruined.
Of a Sunday morning, just wanting to see how that happened. So,
oh, that's cool. Yeah. I love all the old school, like I'm brushing my teeth, listening to the radio. Like you fall in love with the sport in different ways, and everyone's got a different story.
Yeah.
And like, even though you can't pinpoint like, oh, this, but you kind of can, because you have all these little stories woven in there is the way how you fell in love with the sport.
Yeah.
And it's fun hearing. So I'm guessing that some of those were a part of your best or greatest fights, or fights you love, like are Hagler and Hearns and Leonard were of some of your favorite fights of all time, or?
Yeah, I think of fights that I've watched on TV. Certainly, I mean, Hagler Hearns is it's far beyond anything. Now, my very favorite fight of all time is partly because I was there.
Okay.
And I think is arguably the greatest fight of all time. Certainly one of the very greatest, and that's Diego Corrales, Jose Luis Castillo.
It's a good one. Watch it if you haven't.
Seriously. I mean, find it and watch it. And I knew Diego a little bit. He was one of the guys I'd gotten to know in Las Vegas. And it was also a great experience for me because knowing my somewhat literary approach to life, the media folks, the PR guys at the Mandalay Bay, where it was, sat me next to Bud Schulberg, who wrote On the Waterfront and What Makes Sammy Run, and was at that stage still doing some boxing pieces for a newspaper in Glasgow for some reason. And so
Maybe some Galata pieces. Oh, that's Scotland. Never mind. That's Poland. Okay, close enough.
And it just to be sitting at a fight next to Bud Schulberg was pretty cool for me. And then this incredible thing unfolding in front of us. And really, we cannot stress this enough. If you haven't seen this fight, you have to see this fight.
Yeah.
So for me, that will always be a special moment. And also for different reasons, being ringside for the fourth Juan Manuel Marquez Manny Pacquiao fight. The emotion in that arena afterwards was not like anything I've ever experienced.
It's a pretty brutal knockout.
It was a brutal knockout. And as we all know, Pacquiao is viewed by his fans as more than just a fighter. Jinky Pacquiao was inconsolable. It was a tremendous
And she couldn't
shock.
get into the ring. Like, she couldn't get up because he was on the edge, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And, and I didn't realize, I don't always see the broadcast afterwards, but I didn't realize somebody said to me, why was Jim almost like crying during the broadcast afterwards? And it was because...
Well, Jim gets emotional.
Jim does get emotional.
But it's good
and
for the
that's one
broadcast.
of the great things about Jim as a broadcaster, is that he does get emotional. And I said, well, like, you don't know what the emotion in that place was like. It's still, for me, hard to describe. It was as raw as it gets. And that was to have been there. And it was the last fight that Larry Merchant called for HBO.
Oh, that's right.
And it was being able to be in the bar with Larry Merchant afterwards, and talk to him and about, which was always a treat. And just everything about that fight. And it was a heck of a fight up until the knockout, too. Makes it one of my favorites.
It was a great fight. I was watching with many friends. It just and then almost like another, like a team sport where that was with 1 second left in the round. Everything you mentioned, the emotion, his wife, his fans, Jim, the whole feeling of the arena, and then it was with 1 second left in the round. It was like a buzzer beater. It was crazy. Yeah. We don't have a ton of time left, but I kind of want to rapid fire. Okay. Like if you can go quick answers on some of these.
We'll try. I'm not very good at that.
That's all right. What should fight fans look most forward to in 2016?
I hope we're going to have two really big fights. This is sounds like an HBO PR question.
No.
Or answer. But I hope we have Sergey Kovalev against Andre Ward and Canelo Alvarez against Gennady Golovkin. I know a lot of people don't believe we're going to get Canelo Alvarez, Gennady Golovkin. I think we are going to get it. We might not get it in 2016, but I think we're going to get it very soon. But I feel very confident about Sergey Kovalev, Andre Ward, which I think would be a heck of a fight.
It'd be great. Fans would agree.
Yeah.
If you were a fighter, what would your ring music be?
It was always going to be Welcome to the Jungle.
Always.
Yeah. I decided quite early on, once I heard that song, I'm like, yeah, that'd be it. And then Carl Froch used it.
So he stole it from you.
That's the only reason I'm not a
Are you going to go
professional
see them?
fighter. Is because
that's it.
It's because Carl Froch took my entrance music. Otherwise, I was.
We could set something up. HBO, Froch, Mulvaney.
Time has passed.
Yeah, you're right.
Gone. Fights have a sell-by date, as we learned.
Yeah. It'd probably only do 400,000.
Exactly.
So the hell with it. Let's just throw it out.
Yeah.
Mayweather and Pacquiao are on their way out. I mean, it looks like. Who knows? Do you think there's going to be two fighters in this that are going to carry the sport like they did, pay-per-view numbers wise? Or are we going to see like a smorgasbord of fighters that are gonna carry the sport into the future? And can you name a couple that will?
I think over the next couple of years, the winner of Canelo Golovkin. Canelo potentially is already there. He's getting very close. Gennady, he's only had one pay-per-view outing, but I think if he were to meet and beat Canelo, it would be him. He'd have to be, I think, the biggest opportunity right now. Down the line, I don't know, because all these guys who are very good right now and ready to take over, the Kovalevs, the Golovkins of the world, they're in their early to mid-30s. Canelo has the potential to be lasting a long time because he's still a kid.
Yeah.
5-6 years from now, it might be somebody we just haven't even thought of. I mean, back in 2006, no one would have thought that in a few years the biggest stars in the sport would be Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather.
Nope.
No one. Floyd couldn't keep fans in the arena.
Yeah.
And Manny was an exciting little guy, but he was a little guy and he didn't speak English.
Yep.
So who would have known? So it may be somebody we just have no thought about right now. I think Errol Spence has got some real potential.
Maybe Crawford?
I think Crawford
got potential.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope, because I really like Terence Crawford. I think he's a terrific fighter. He's a very good boxer, and he's become an exciting must-see fighter. And I kind of want to see guys who don't talk trash and don't talk nonsense. So we're nice, well-spoken.
Well, when he
Midwestern
talks
guys.
trash, though, it's fun.
When he
and
does,
he means it.
Yeah.
He saves it.
Because the thing is, like, he's a nice, quiet guy, but like his eyes, man. You
Oh,
look
yeah.
at his eyes. He's seen some things.
Yeah,
and
did you
he
get what
can
you
do
asked
some
for?
things.
Remember that at the end of the, oh, incredible. Yeah, I feel like he's
hope
quotable.
So.
Yeah.
I hope so. I very much like Terrence. I think he's very good for the sport.
I totally agree. Skip that one. I had a nice 2021 boxing, but that could be a mystery. Who's the favorite person you ever interviewed in boxing?
I should have had a good answer for that. Boy, I don't know. You know, actually, yeah, I do know. Ricky Hatton. We talked about him already. Ricky
At the
Hatton,
bar?
over breakfast.
Oh, nice.
And he's just hilarious. You know, he has more photographs, I've been told, in his house of comedians, stand-up comedians, than he does of boxers. And he's a naturally really, really funny guy. He tells this great story about his mom being incredibly drunk and going up to his next opponent. And it's just, yeah, Ricky was a lot of fun. I only got to cover a couple of his fights, but no, very enjoyable.
I know that you said you wanted, there was a funny, you had a funny story you wanted to tell when we were talking about it earlier. Was it about Bert? Unless it wasn't.
No, I was going to say the whole story of how I ended up going to Vegas with a stupid website and all of that.
Okay, perfect.
But, yes. But you mentioned Bert, and everything with Bert was Bert. The great thing about Bert was he never took himself seriously, even slightly.
That's what people liked.
Funny. Everything was funny. But the great thing about Bert is he would tell you this joke, and he had absolutely no recollection of the fact that he just told you the same joke like a day before. And in the course of a week, you could hear the exact same thing from Bert. And each time you'd think, I'm just going to treat this like I haven't heard it before. And he would tell you the exact same joke that he told you 24 hours before, bursts into a gale of laughter. Just absolutely burst into a gale of laughter. Cigar in his hand and just like have to take a drink of scotch or vodka. And you're like, wow, Bert, that's pretty funny. He goes, I thought you'd like that one.
Bert.
Yeah.
No shame.
Bert. He gave me the exact same joke and all the inscriptions in his book, and it's just, yeah, bless his heart. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a treat. I missed him very much when he left us. It's just, I would almost be like looking for that fedora, going, it's got to be here somewhere in the bar, and it wasn't. And those first few fight weeks without him were tough.
It's unique though to boxing because you don't see in a lot of sports like football or sometimes in baseball, but I mean you see cut men who have been around for 70 years. You see writers and analysts that have been covering it since the 50s and the 40s, and now there's a very few around, but they tend to stick around longer. And if you're within this community, you can learn so many things. And you've been around guys like Bert Sugar, Larry Merchant. I mean, and Jim Lampley's been around. To put a bow on everything, what's one piece of advice that you've gotten from anyone who's been in the game for a long time? Is there something that like Larry or Bert told you when you were starting out, or something they did that you saw routinely?
No, I just think the one thing is that you often see, especially with young kids coming up, and it's great that you have guys who are blogging or doing all of that, who might not have journalistic training, is don't forget that the fighters are your subjects, they're not your friends. And that's good for the fighters to recognize as well for journalists. You can get close to some guys, and it's a different situation now that I'm with HBO, because it's a somewhat, you become closer to certain fighters because you see them all the time, and and I'm not so much an objective reporter as working for a network. But you often see sometimes guys maybe just want to be around fighters a bit too much, and you need to have that sort of journalistic distance and that journalistic integrity to be able to cover the sport properly and to be able to do anything journalistically properly. And frankly, also, there's no faithfulness in boxing anyway. There's really not. It's best for everybody to just, not get too close and always watch your back. Always watch your back.
That's
just
a good
check to make sure there are no knives in it.
If someone asks me in 30 years, I'll be sure to use that and as my quote. Kieran, where can everyone find you on Twitter?
At Kieran Mulvaney. So easy to find on KieranMulvaney.com, my website.
And then Vargas Toledo on Saturday, and you'll have some content up on the HBO YouTube page.
Yeah, inside HBOboxing.com as well, our boxing blog. That's where we put all our videos and our articles, and where you can also find the podcast.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Kieran.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it, man.
Appreciate it. Part 2, because I've got a million other questions. I'm sure Twitter does too. Everyone, I'm Jared Gilkerson. That's at Gilkerson Radio on Twitter. And until the next time, we'll see ya.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Doesn't matter. No, it doesn't.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.